everyone.
We're finally at episode 4 for our Reading Tamora Pierce series, and this is the last episode in series A, which is all about Emelan. Which is kind of sad, because I have loved returning to the world of Emelan.
Won't be the last time we'll come back either.
Of course not.
I mean, because we love them all, and you know, just anyway, they're alive to us, and so it's only fitting that we end this series with what we believe is the true last book of the series.
It is, chronologically.
Chronologically, it's called The Will of the Empress. So,
well, spoilers. Let me do our usual spiel, which is.
Last we checked, previously on Reading Tamora Pierce.
Basically, we've done episode 1, which is the Circle of Magic and all about Sandry. And then episode 2 was the Circle Opens and it was all about Triss. And episode 3 was about melting stones and battle magic, which, and then it was about Briar. And this last episode, like Maki just said, is about the Will of the Empress, which is, for us, the series finale, basically, of this entire world. I mean, I would kill to read more books in Emelan, but if it was going to end, this is actually it's a great place to end it, bookend for it, yeah. Yeah, it's a book, essentially, that is set after every single other book that we have already talked about, and it involves our 4 mages now returning to each other's company after being apart for all those years, and going through all the different things that they did in all the other books.
We alluded to the timelines being a little screwy in the last video, but needless to say, this is 4 years after the events, the simultaneous concurrent events of the Circle Open series, where they're all separate, right? And it finds our young mages as young adults.
Yeah.
So
the main plot of this one is both them reuniting as a circle, like being together. Because they are all headed to Namorn to accompany Sandry, who has to go and see her lands there and to be there at the request of her cousin. Who happens to be
said Empress. Yeah. And her will is legend.
So that is essentially the main plot. We might get a little spoiler later on, but for now that's really all you need to know. Yeah, so in general, I think for me, this was the first time I had reread Will of the Empress in like years. I think I've only ever read it once.
That's true.
So I didn't remember as much of it as I thought I did. Like the only thing I really remember was how it ends. And essentially I pretty much forgot everything leading up to it. So my reactions felt so genuine because I didn't know what was going to happen.
It was
so I was like, every time something happened, I was like, why? God.
And I'm there, totally enjoying.
It was like reading it for the first time, even though I know I've read it before. And I think for me, after reading it and building up to it, after reading all those other books, just having this one be the last book I read in that world was so satisfying in a way.
It lands on such a satisfying note.
And yeah, I can see like the canon discrepancies a little bit, maybe, like here and there.
Yeah, the canon discrepancies are.
It's funny because it's actually not quite as bad as I expected it to be.
Yeah.
Like I thought it was gonna be a whole lot worse, but it really wasn't.
No, exactly. It's you can live with the kind of discrepancies and just again just kind of sort of blur the lines and all right, let's move on. I'll gloss over that little weird timeline hitch.
It's interesting to me too because this is Maki's favorite book, I think, right, of the Emelan series. What's funny to me is this book has so much court intrigue in it, and he doesn't normally like that.
Does it?
Yeah.
Web of lies.
It's actually done in a really subtle way, which I think is interesting because it's
my god.
It is so much court intrigue, and I think that's why you don't like any other court intrigue, because if you're measuring it up to this, it's not going to play out the same way.
And I don't care half the time about anybody else who's embroiled in this court intrigue. More importantly, because there's so much magic. That's probably why I didn't notice it at all. Because again, and
also because you genuinely love all these 4 characters, so I feel like you wouldn't, like you'd gloss over this other things going on in the background, maybe like the machinations of other people. In which case, there you go. Now I understand the whole court intrigue aspect of it. Now that you seriously, until this moment, I had no idea that there was this much court intrigue. So I was reading this entire thing, I'm like, huh.
Because for me, it's not the main thing, and it's a good segue also to kind of like begin to get into the plot, right? Where and oh my god, it is court intrigue. So here's the plot. I'm suddenly, as the first time in my life, realizing it's so much court intrigue. Sandry, as an adult, is technically, as far as Namornese culture and society is concerned, is a very wealthy heiress. And that's important because in Namorn, you inherit from the mother side.
Yeah.
So she's gonna get all the lands, all the money, and is literally the wealthiest heiress of them all. And a cousin to the Empress to boot. So that's insane amount of political clout. That's insane amounts of wealth. So people are going to want to bag that heiress and make them their, you know, little betrothed fiance thing.
Including the Empress who wants to keep those lands and that money in Namor's like control and under her specifically.
Exactly. So they want that, and the court intrigue comes in when she's trying to make power plays. Oh my God, this is the first time I'm realizing.
Anyway,
the court intrigue comes in when the Empress begins to make power plays against Sandry.
But she's not the only one.
And it starts actually with her making things a little difficult on one side with Duke Vedris, which is exactly why the Duke is saying that, you know what, Namorn could make things difficult for Emelan if Sandry does not agree to the Empress's request for her to come home in Tenderlands. And on the other side, what Sandry begins to find out is that the Empress has been putting some pressure on the folks that she, you know, who are managing her estate on her behalf. Yeah. So that's so much court intrigue.
That's how she ends up going to Namorn in the first place, and that's actually one of the things we wanted to talk about a little, because life in Namorn is very different than what they're used to in Emelan. In Namorn, they have to be around, especially because Sandry is specifically related to the Empress. They end up becoming involved in a lot of the court things, so they're always at the palace, and they always have to be nice and play nice with all of these things.
And Namorn, by contrast with Emelan is so progressive. Emelan is so, the weather is so mild, right? I mean, they experience all the seasons, I think, but nothing as harsh and as overbearing as what Namorn actually is, even from a weather perspective. And then all of a sudden, with Duke Vedris in charge of Emelan, very level-headed, very cool, very progressive, you have Empress Berenine, who is basically the despot slash, you know, it's
Queen of Hearts, basically.
Oh yeah, absolutely, but magnificently beautiful. Sometimes. So she's, I imagine her played by, like, if we flash forward Angelina Jolie like 30 years later, she would totally be a Berenine. Like, that's exactly the kind of beauty and that strength that you're gonna want to see in this Empress.
I think what's interesting for me about Namorn is that, unlike with Emelan, where there is, like, they do have sort of classes and everything, but there doesn't feel like there's too much of a separation between them, and there's not like a specific role just for Duke Vedris and Sandry, who are maybe of the higher class. They feel a little bit more connected to the other people.
Yeah.
In Namorn, it's so clearly divided, and in this book, you're particularly, like, centered in the world of nobles and with their machinations, and sometimes I'm just like reading it and I'm like, this is so shallow. Like, or this is, and there's like so much pandering and so many social niceties, and I'm just like,
because
really?
At the center of all of this
again,
craziness is the Empress herself.
The Empress again, exactly.
She's
actually foundational to the setting and to the story, because it's really because of her that this entire thing is like happening.
Yeah, and there's this like beauty and strength to her that is just as offset by her just kind of capriciousness, and she's gonna want what she wants.
Yeah, she's
and
very
what the
creepy.
Empress desires, what the Empress wills, she gets. That's the kind of despot she is.
Plus she has like 2 great mages on her side, so.
Yeah, and several, you know, and basically the entire empire,
and
practically
spies everywhere.
Spies everywhere, and they worship her like nobody's
business.
They
worship her, but they're also scared of her. So
right, and so to have that kind of that kind of central figure running the entire
you
nation.
can see how she became the villain of this piece, really.
Right, and she's not even. And the coolest part is that you wouldn't necessarily think of her as a villain at first.
She's not a traditional villain.
She's not like my God. She's not like what's his face, the Emperor of Yanjing, who is just
clearly evil.
Berenine is not evil, but she will get what she wants because she's kind. She's not cruel.
Or she tries not to.
Or she tries not to be anyway. She tries to be fair, but she's also very capricious and will bend people to her whims. I mean, this entire thing would not have come together like this if Berenine was not herself.
True.
She's generous if she wants to be, but she's just as frozen and as you know, terrible as the Sith, the kind of like the little lake of ice there that they have all the way up north.
Another one of my favorite things about The Will of the Empress is that we now have a book where all 4 of them have point of views again, and I think that's so much fun because it's a throwback to basically what the Circle of Magic was. So you get to hear from Briar, and you get to hear from Daja, and you get to hear from Triss, and you get to hear from Sandry, and each of them has a different view of life at this point. Like, Triss, because of her travels and because she's managed to now have some control over her power, she's pretty chill about most things. Like she knows what she wants and she knows what she's capable of.
And she's still practical as all heck.
Yeah, she's practical as hell. She still thinks, it matters to her still what people think of her, and that's why she's so determined to pursue the future she wants, which is to study at Lightsbridge and get accredited, and so that people won't like
think that she's you know, like this freak, because all the magic that she's managed to master mostly kills people or drives them insane. So they wouldn't even believe that she had it, and if they did, they would think that she cheated her way through life as though that were even possible.
And then there's Daja, who's like, she is obviously a master smith and she is making her own living out of her living metal things.
She's doing well.
She's like, she's actually the most like collected of these four still. Like she is still the one who is collected. Like she's got like a solid presence there.
And I think that's her trader culture background. I mean, they don't always want to show emotion, and they just want to make sure that everything's fine. And so whatever, you know, things that Daja faces, she just kind of we're gonna chill and we're gonna do this. It's gonna be fine. So. And
then there's Briar, who is having PTSD after the war that he went through with Evie and Rosethorn in Yanjing. And I think for me, like,
that was rough.
It was rough, like, to see that. And it's interesting because he, as the only boy in this circle, like, he wants to protect the girls, and he also just wants to, you know, come off still as like strong and like capable and okay,
and feels like he doesn't have to be, you know, slowing his life down just because he can't sleep, or he sees these terrible visions of the war where they're not really there. Again, hallmarks of, you know, not all of them, but they're definitely hallmarks of PTSD. So that mix of vulnerability and strength is very interesting for Briar this time around.
And then there's Sandry, who is now coming to terms with the fact that she actually does a little bit resent all the others for leaving and that she had to stay behind. And she's also Sandry has always been the kind of person who will pull rank when she feels it's necessary, but it's also not something she flaunts. So to be thrown into this viper's nest of like all these nobles who are like, I'm this person and I can do this and you can do that because you're rich, and to be paraded around as if she's more an object for someone to acquire. Obviously, poor Sandry is having a lot of like, she is literally having like tantrums over this because it's not her style. That's just not who she is.
Ironically, this is Sandry at her best and her worst.
Yeah, you get to see both sides.
Because as a child, and even as a 14-year-old, you know, kind of accredited mage with a student, that's always her best foot forward. There's no opportunity to see any flaws in her character because she's just always at the top of her game, and she's always in over her head. I never
thought of it that way. That's really
right?
good, though.
So if you think about it, like she never flaunted her wealth or her status unless she needed it to defend somebody, which is what she does basically all throughout Circle of Magic, where she pulls everyone together and says, we're one now. That's who we are. With Pasco, she was the Duke's right hand, and basically just said, you know what, I'm in over my head, I'm gonna do something. So there was no moment to see any of Sandry's flaws.
That's interesting. I actually think that's a better way of looking at it, because I was telling Maki that I was having a difficult time with Sandry because I could totally understand that she was put out by the fact that nobody wanted to reform the circle and like be connected in the way that they used to, because I would feel the same way.
Right.
But when she started getting really pissy, like when she started throwing sort of tantrums, which is not like her in general, I think it was actually more like her than I thought when I was reading it, because like, so she lives with a lot of pressure.
And let's set the stage here, right? So this is Sandry, right hand of the Duke, left behind by her brother and sisters, and basically used to having so much autonomy, so much power, and basically also spoiled by having such close bonds. All of those are taken away from her in an instant. And I think what makes her kind of a catalyst here is because Sandry doesn't really change. She still fights for what she wants, but it's everybody else that seems to have changed, and Sandry hasn't. So that makes her, I feel, the catalyst character in this story, where it's because of her journey that makes everybody change and everybody reconsider what the hell's going on, because she's still, let's be a circle, and by the way, I will not stand for being treated like an object.
Yeah.
That never, so it all ironically spools around Sandry. Even if she does get really pissy, but hey, that's always what she's been. It's just we didn't get a chance to see that because nobody could bring it out. She was not put in a difficult situation. In fact, the story starts out with her being scolded by Duke Vedris.
Yeah.
And she never gets scolded. The Duke loves her to death, but because she's been neglecting her lands in Namorn, The Duke's like, yeah, you call your kind of like seneschal, your clansman kind of prosy and boring, but you handle minutiae for me. Why not for your own lands? You've been neglecting them. And she's like, I don't care for being scolded by my uncle. And so that sets it off, even Sandry's journey of just trying to wrangle her heritage versus her desire to have a free life.
So we've kind of alluded to it already, but the kind of last thing we wanted to discuss is how this book is really like where we see them as adults interacting together, because we've seen them as children and then we've seen them sort of as teenagers apart from each other, and now we're seeing them come back together as almost full adults, really.
With the weight of the years and experience that they've had.
And I think like it's interesting because as sort of what we mentioned at the beginning of the book, they don't know how to be around each other because they're different people now and they've gone through different things, and some of those things they're ashamed of. Some of them they're afraid of what the others would think, or some of them just want to pretend to be brave, like Briar. And I think, like, for me, that's actually a very powerful thing because Tamora Pierce doesn't shy away from showing the fact that there is this friction between them and there is this separation between them. But she also doesn't make it seem impossible that, you know, there's still that connection they have and that it would eventually reforge itself into something different, but still just as good as or strong as their old connection.
And here's an interesting thing I noticed from reading the 4 books first, and then Battle Magic, and then Melting Stones, and then jumping into this thing. It seems so dumb at first. We're just like, come on, just open your connection, just talk to each other. Or it seems so trivial at first that, oh, they're hiding stuff because they're adults. But the thing is, it's so pronounced in their space because when they were kids, they could literally smell and feel and see what the other kids were smelling, hearing, seeing, and feeling. So for them to have the weight of, let's say if you were Daja and knowing what happened in Cold Fire, where she had this friend who turned out not to be such a great person, Triss, and the amount of jealousy and idiocy that she had to face, being crazy, being a crazy talented mage. Then you've got Sandry, who is wondering what the hell's going on. And then of course Briar with his PTSD. It's almost like they were protecting each other from the worst of it and protecting themselves from the worst of it.
But I also think it's because as adults they realize like there are certain inner thoughts I think are best kept to themselves. Like I don't...
Because can you imagine like feeling, like, again, I think they just really felt so uncomfortable returning to that old bond because of how powerful it was.
They needed to forge a different kind of intimacy, and by the end of Will of the Empress that happens for them, and I think that ultimately that's the best part of this entire series. Like, it ends on such a high note, and like I can imagine their future just...
And I think it's because they figured out how to find the right boundaries.
Yeah.
Meaning the things that they were withholding, they found a way to expose, and the things that they still felt they needed to keep, they were able to keep.
Yeah.
And I think that's just any relationship really, it's always good boundaries and knowing when to give and when to hold back. So that was fun.
Yeah, so all in all, Will of the Empress, perfect ending. I think it's a great way to really finish off the Emelan series because it's just, it gives you another story where they're all together, and it also shows you how much they've grown from the very first book until the very last, and I think that's great. And it ends in a note where, like, if ever one day she gets the chance to write or explore more of that world, you could actually add to it.
That's true.
So I think that's fascinating as well, so yeah, love it. So, now we're gonna move on to our last character spotlight, and obviously we're gonna be talking about Daja Kisubo. I'm saying that right?
Yeah, of trader fame and of
so Daja's
metalsmith extraordinaire.
She is a trader, and traders are nomadic people who basically go from coast
point
to
A
coast.
to point B. There's some of them go on land, some of them are seafaring.
And that's Daja's family. They were seafaring.
And there's such a close-knit culture where they are not allowed to touch anything created. They're literally buyers and sellers. That's what they do. They make deals, they acquire things.
They don't make things.
They don't make them. In fact, it's so frowned upon that whenever Daja would try to hold lugsha tools or even look at, and lugsha are, by the way, in Trader Talk, the folks who, artisans, right, who create stuff, she would get a punishment. Like, I think they would beat her or something like that because there's just, it's against like tradition and a lot of bad luck to do non-trader things, which is...
Speaking of bad luck, that's actually Daja's basic backstory. She is the only survivor of a shipwreck. Her entire clan of traders was slaughtered, and she's the only survivor.
Her immediate clan, anyway, that was third ship Kisubo, had sunk.
And Nico is the one who found her after 5 days that she was stranded at sea.
And the trader religion is so specific that in their creation myth, bookkeeper Oti and I want to say Trader Koma, you know, pretty much log every single trader's name, and there's like a little balance sheet of all of the good and the bad and the luck that you have. When you're a survivor of a terrible tragedy, you have like the crappiest luck.
So you're taking
because it's
out
almost
the
like
books.
yeah, so you're taken off of the books, and that's what they did when Nico found her.
Yeah.
They considered her Trangshi, which is such an interesting character development arc, because in that instant, so much of Daja is her culture,
and to have that taken away
in a blink of an eye, and out of nowhere to be handed a new culture, which is to be a mage, specifically an ambient mage with a bunch of, you know, non-traders, right, was just nuts for her. And so for her to
she has such a great character arc. Like
that's true though.
All of them have good character arcs, but I think she and Briar have the ones that rival each
the
other
most
in
dramatic.
terms of like,
it's just Daja's so chill. I think that's the only reason why it's not dramatic, because with Briar there was the whole rose thorn mother son kind of relationship.
But Daja's really chill
just so
about life.
kind of just like, we're just gonna calm the hell down and we're gonna keep chugging forward. So there's almost
by the way, spoiler, sorry, I forgot. Daja does regain her trader status. It happens in one of the books because of something incredible she did, which basically cancels out everything. That was bad luck for her during the shipwreck.
And so she manages to regain her trader status again. In fact, one of the things that were alluded to was, you know, because you can get your trader status back once you're stricken off the books. Woe to the traders who have to owe you so much that to pay you back. This is also part of traders tradition. Though you don't owe anybody anything, they're almost like Lannisters. To pay you back, they have to put you back on the books, because that's like a lot of money and a lot of like rituals and rites and stuff like that. So she gets that back, and more, and then some.
Yeah. So speaking of Daja, yeah. So one of the things that I think is most true of her character is that she's very chill, which is funny to me because her main thing is that she's a smith, and she's a smith mage.
And there's nothing chill about smithing.
You work
it's a lot
with
of
fire, okay?
And a lot of hitting. Like, you can't just kind of like, I think I'm just gonna tap this thing. No, you have to put your entire, you know, like everything.
And Daja's so brilliant at it.
She's amazing. She's strong. She's powerful. She is so level-headed. And she's a great fighter, because that staff that she carries is not just like ornamental. No, she knows how to use that thing.
And she's loyal.
And she's so loyal. I mean, she's actually...
I think that's true of all four of them, actually. They're very loyal.
Especially to each other. But Daja specifically, I think her strength is in her level-headedness.
Oh yeah.
Like
she's like the one who'll think.
Yeah, she's not prone to... It's her and Briar, actually, that are not prone to hysterics or prone to anything...
Fits of temper?
Yeah, anything temperamental at all. No, Daja is very...
That's Triss and Sandry, I think.
And very creative, obviously, because smithing.
Oh yeah.
Right? And so that's
her magic, actually. She works with fire and with metal.
Yeah, and so a lot of her ambient magic comes from her ability to manipulate the fire, her ability to connect to the metals.
Yeah. And
then kind of combine the two together.
So now that we've talked about Daja's history and her personality and her ability, we get to talk about her relationships, which is my favorite.
So kind of a rundown.
We're going to start with Sandry. She is based... From the first book, they clearly have a very special friendship.
Yeah.
Mostly because I think Sandry has had exposure to traders, and she's not biased against them the way the other two are.
And Sandry actually knows a few trader words, because the trader she was exposed to was specifically her kind of nursemaid that sadly did not survive the plague that killed her parents and her family, and I forget which place that she was in. So seeing Daja and making that connection, it was Daja actually who...
And plus she stood up for Daja, like the first time we met.
Pulled rank on some random noble and said, you will not treat her this way, even if there's like a huge bias against traders. Not under my watch, because everybody has to be treated fairly in front of Lady Sandril and Fatoran. But with her bringing Daja into the fold, Daja finally kind of reciprocates and agrees to that their relationship is to the level of Sati, which is...
Like sister.
Yeah, the non-trader that is considered family. And even if she, at the time this connection was made, Daja wasn't a trader anymore, that bit of thing still mattered, right? And so Sandry is the most sympathetic to her. To this day, they're still, you know, the closest, I think, of the four.
I think so too.
And only because, again, spoiler, the first time anybody opened their connection to each other anyway was between Sandry and Daja. So
spoiler, they're also the first ones to reopen their connection in Will of the Empress.
So that said,
Daja and Sandry are definitely like...
Yeah, they're almost like true sisters.
Yeah, basically. I think that's how they see each other anyway.
Right. Which leads us to Triss.
Daja and Triss.
Right.
Funnily enough, I was just thinking about this. Actually, out of the entire circle, those two are like, they're close, but they're not that close.
Interestingly enough, right?
They're the most like polar opposite, I think. Like they get along, but they're polar opposite. And I think part of that is because they don't have they start out with not very great opinions of each other. And that's like an understatement because Triss is like a very biased
she's a merchant, traders. So she's basically in the same
thing with
field.
Daja, where she's like,
so they're almost like rivals really culturally, culturally,
and like
right?
because Daja's so chill, I don't think she really has time for Triss's temper tantrums.
No, she doesn't. She's like, I can't. She just doesn't know the time for any of that.
But also because she's so level-headed and patient, like
she can actually handle Triss at Triss's most ornery.
So I think that in a way, for me, like the way their relationship works is they balance each other out.
Because she'll get sympathy from Sandry, but she's gonna get no sympathy from Triss. But she's gonna get a lot of like common sense, which works with her level-headedness, I think. Because that's their deal. Triss is the no-nonsense type. It's Daja's the no-nonsense type
that
too.
Works for them.
When those stars align, it's no-nonsense mode, and we'll get into that in a bit. That's why it totally works.
I love those? Daja and Briar.
Daja and Briar are the bros. Like we mentioned this in Briar's book, and when we mentioned this in Briar's
when we talked about Briar's character spotlight. But they really are though. They're bros. Like they're like the kind of people who would like pal around and like.
They're the ones who can actually get really. And interesting enough, it was actually Briar in Daja's book, literally the book Daja's book. It was actually Briar's magic that sort of intertwines the most with hers that creates some really awesome stuff at the start of the book. So there's that connection still that it's almost like it doesn't make sense. Fire and steel versus wood and plants. But it just, I don't know, their personalities just complement each other, I suppose.
And I think also it's because both of them are very much, again, both of them are the type of people to think.
And they're street smart and they're fighters.
Street smart and they're fighters, exactly.
So they're the bros. They're the brothers of this piece.
And then we have Frostpine, Daja's teacher. Oh my gosh, they're so cute. He's like the uncle to Daja, I think. That's how it feels. They're like family.
That she kisses him on the top of his head. So
like, she's always like, there. But that's how
and Frostpine is very, very comfortable with her. Frostpine is very, very honest and open.
They have a very chill, familial relationship. It's not like Briar and Rosethorn where there's such a strong, like, dramatic emotional tie. With them, the emotional tie is there, but it's chill.
Right, and in the same way that, let's say, Lark and Sandry,
they're also very chill, actually.
This mother-mentor, type of deal. And we've got Triss and Nico, who are student teacher, total nerds. We've got Briar and Rosethorn, who are mother and child, peppered with the whole I'm loud, you're loud, we're both abrasive.
Frostpine, it's like a niece with her favorite uncle. That's what it is.
Right? And they're very, very relaxed around each other. It's just really comforting. It's almost unassuming. It's almost like part of the infrastructure of what they are. But when you see it, it's there. They're so
lovely, though.
They're so tender with each other.
It's especially lovely in Coldfire.
Yeah.
It's so
oddly enough. And they're so independent. But with Frostpine and Daja, it's really just, I'm chill, you're chill, let's do this. Oh, we go here? Okay, that's fine. And so that's that. So to have that bond, and again, at the start, and we'll segue into this real quick, to have Daja's opening arc in Will of the Empress also introduce everybody else's opening arc, where you can only stay at Discipline Cottage at a certain age. And for Frostpine to say, hey, you can live in my forge for a while, but Daja's like, I have no home. I come here, I have no home. Is Sandry just going to expect me to live with her and live off her like richness? I've got money too. I'll buy my own house. That's how level-headed she is, and that's how much independent she is from Frostpine. Where Frostpine's like, yeah, okay, we're cool, we're good, but I get that you have to live your own life. Yeah. And he lets her do that.
Yeah. So there's actually a reason we put Daja as the very last character spotlight, even though technically she could have been third. First of all, she kind of.
Well, okay. First of all, our favorite is Briar. Like, let's get that straight. Like, we could have given him.
But we love Daja in a different way because and it makes a lot of sense to us to put her last because Will of the Empress is really where we see her come of age. I think that's
true, and in the most beautiful and
it's just lovely. And it's not just in that sense. The specific sense we're thinking of, and the one that's most prominent in the book, is that we kind of get to see Daja actually fall in love with someone.
Yeah, and to realize that this is the kind of love that she apparently was looking for the whole time. That she didn't know she was looking for.
It's so well done too, and I think like it's such a big turning point for her. She has such a big, it's such a big realization to her and for everyone too.
Yeah, and for her to realize that there's actually some fire in that forge.
And also, like what Maki was saying, like it at the beginning of the book, Daja is the one who takes responsibility, and she's like, I'm gonna buy my own house, and everyone can live there with me if they want to.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, this is grown up Daja. Like in Cold Fire, she's also grown up, but not too much in a sense, I guess.
Yeah.
Like she's just steady and there. But unlike the other three with their second books, where they do like things happen to them specifically.
Yeah.
For her, it's like
she takes it in stride,
yeah.
actually, and she's very relaxed about it, even if there's like turmoil inside. And so we wanted to give Daja this last character spotlight because we really felt like it was the most dramatic, it was the most beautiful.
Will of the Empress has like her best character arc, I think.
That's true.
Like she's amazing in all the other books, but this is the one. But
here is where the one where, and again, it's so subtle. I mean, imagine just going, I'm gonna get my own house.
It's her falling in love. It's her taking responsibility. It's her providing, being there for her sister Sati. I mean,
it's her providing a house for the other two who aren't as well to do, or maybe Briar has his own.
Briar has money.
Right, but that she reserved a room at the top
lovely. And she thought about it. Like Triss gets the top floor, Briar gets the
and they live at like the number 9 Cheeseman Street,
yeah.
right? And so, and out of nowhere, when the Duke, and here's a fun part, right? So, interesting enough at the start, when Duke Vedris tries to ask, you know, a favor of the three, somebody, I think him or some one of the guards comments, do you know that the rune for chaos is actually 2 characters for mage and 1 character for house? And then somebody quips, well, what about 3 characters for mage and 1 character for house? What does that say? And then one of the guards mutters, number 9 Cheeseman Street. Chime's freaking everybody out. Briar says, you know, to Daja, can you sorry, Briar tells...
No, Daja talks first. Daja
talks first. It's like, get her out of here. She's been eating, you know, fish roe pearls.
And then Briar says, don't let her
roosted by shotguns, yeah. You know?
And Triss is like, I'm meditating! That's Triss.
From like the top of the thing, because obviously the top floor was reserved for her, right? Because she's the weather mage of them all. So to have that chaos be housed by Daja's practicality, and then for her to ground Sandry and to back Briar up and to back Triss up as well, as they find their way to each other, you know, this was it. She played her part.
Yeah, that's basically it. So there, it makes me sad to think that we finally reached the last video of our Emelan series. Sobs forever.
Yeah.
Not like we can't return to it,
we're totally gonna come back. There's just no way. This is like the 9th, 10th time I've read Will of the Empress.
I've read the Circle books, and the Circle opens a lot, but not Will of the Empress.
Yeah,
but anyway, we hope you guys enjoyed listening to our videos and our little chats about all of these books. And we hope that you guys have been encouraged to read them or reread them, if that may be the case. We really, really genuinely think that Tamora Pierce's Emelan world is amazing, and we've had so much fun filming this series, and we're looking forward to Series B, which is all about Tortald as well. So, if you guys have any questions about the entire series, about Will of the Empress, about any of the characters, we would love to answer them in the comments, especially Maki, because he's probably going to be better at answering them than I am.
Yeah, we're going to do like spoiler alerts and stuff, and, so if you guys want spoilery stuff, we'll do that. We'll just preface it with spoiler! Anyway, we hope you guys have enjoyed the series so far, and we look forward to bringing you the next part in 2018. Bye!